Hey guys, wanted to do a breakdown on the video that was recently posted by the UFC. It is Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 1. They posted this in anticipation of the upcoming UFC fight between Makhachev and Tsarukyan. That'll be the second time they're facing each other. So I wanted to do a breakdown on this video, and we're going to get right into it. So one thing right off the bat, early in the fight between Makhachev and Tsarukyan that I noticed Makhachev does really well in a lot of his fights is he punishes guys for going for takedowns on him. So if he's against the cage, or if they're going in for a double, a body lock, or a single leg in this case, he punishes them the whole time. He punches them when they go head inside. So if they try to put their head on him, like on his head to pressure him against the cage, he's very, very good at getting little shots off to the face and little knees off. And what you'll notice here is what's going to happen is he'll keep hitting him and kind of make Tsarukyan almost want to go to a head outside. So you see he ends up kind of here in a head outside single, right? So head outside singles are not the most ideal in MMA just because positionally, even if you get the takedown, a lot of times you end up being in a position that doesn't really hold them down very well, and also is open to submissions or open to putting you into a bad position after the fact, so you can end up getting your back taken, things like that. What you're going to see again, Tsarukyan brings his head back across because that's where he really would rather be in a scenario. Makhachev is doing everything correct here. Reaching to the wrist and the elbow back here behind him. And then what he's doing too is he's bringing his leg and bending it and putting it across the thigh, not letting his leg get between Tsarukyan's legs, right? So you're going to see Tsarukyan really go for a high lift here. At this point, Tsarukyan's probably trying to look for a foot sweep. He's probably trying to kick this back leg out. Makhachev is a big, long dude, so that's actually going to be hard to do. And you can see Makhachev just puts all the weight on his arms here. You can kind of see Tsarukyan is just flexing super hard to make this happen. So he's putting all the weight into the arms. He's putting all of his weight on his leg here, and he's kind of balancing almost right here on the arm and just making himself crazy heavy on that arm. And then he extends his leg out and in, which, you could do that there. Normally, you would be putting the leg to the outside. But he's just doing that because I think he's long and he feels like he has control even with the leg extended. And again, starts fighting the elbows right away and bends the knee again, puts all the weight on his arms, causing him to basically hold his weight the whole time. Tsarukyan puts his head to the outside, going for a outside single because he can't get his head inside deep enough. Basically, I think Tsarukyan here starts feeling like every time he puts his head on Makhachev's chest, he's starting to get beaten up. So he goes head outside, right? So we're in a head outside single. You're going to notice that Makhachev right away is in a position where he's trying to find what to do with this arm. A lot of times, if a guy's very low with their head, you want to push their head lower. If their head is high, you want to cross face their head up. And you'll kind of see him search with his arm here, looking to the cross face. You see I was trying to look for the cross face there. He couldn't get it. So he kind of decides to rest the hand on the back of the head. He's kind of in a middle position at the moment, so he's not quite dedicated himself to an escape. Still fighting the arms down here with his arm. You can see his hand down here. Tsarukyan places the inside knee here to start to put himself into a position to possibly do like a high crotch, or to basically start to lift and then snatch back for the single leg. Makhachev could feel kind of the setup coming here. Pushes the head down super hard, fights the elbow. Push, 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 push. And then Tsarukyan goes, okay, well, I have to go back. I'm going to lose this, right? He's getting pushed down the leg. So he's losing the position. So he goes back to the high knee here. So he brings the leg back up. Makhachev does the right thing, extends the leg out, pushes the head across, right? Putting him back into a position where he could start hitting him again, right? So now overhooks the arm, extend, kicks the leg out and back here. Yep. And he's hitting Tsarukyan with his other arm here to the face. And Tsarukyan kind of gives up and goes, I'm going to go as low as I can and try to fight for a single super low off the ground here. And Makhachev just builds his way back up and fights hands. And this is exhausting if you're the guy going for the takedown. This is a lot of work to get into these positions and then have nothing happen except you kind of have a guy put his weight on you and also have a guy just kind of punch you often. And Makhachev pulls him up, and they're body to body because at that point Tsarukyan's kind of given up the idea that he's going to get this takedown. Something else that I see Makhachev do well is he gets into these 50-50 positions with people, and then he throws knees really well from these positions. Again, I think he has a really, for a big, tall guy at 55, like a taller guy, he has a really good inside game. So he has really good knees, really good like little shots that he gets off. So he'll shoot knees here, and he'll shoot like right hooks to the body, and you kind of see one right here. So he feels the knee, throws a right hook to the body, right hook to the body. Right hook to the body, and then again, open space, he's going to get a knee off here. It's blocked. But what he's also good at is he could feel when somebody else is going to throw their knee, and he'll look for sweeps off of this. So throws a body shot, grabs the wrist. Okay, so off that body shot, Makhachev has grabbed Tsarukyan's right hand, right? So he has an underhook on one side, and he has the wrist control of that same arm across, right? So he's completely controlling one side of Tsarukyan's body. In this scenario, Tsarukyan's now put his leg in the air, which means his back leg is completely planted, but he's going to be off balance to that side, and he'll hit the sweep off of that, right? That is a super, super slick little sweep, honestly, and it puts you in a horrible position too. So a lot of takedowns in MMA, you'll see guys get, but they don't put you in the best positions always. Like I was saying earlier, like you get a single leg, it's not really the most dominant position when you hit the ground. And it can be like scrambled up, and you can get almost in a worse position in some cases. Like I said, your back can get taken, so forth. You can get a double leg on somebody. Cool. That's great too. But you're probably ending up in guard, half guard, best case, maybe side mount. Some of these sweeps like this, like these little tie sweeps, if you hit them right and you're body on body and you can get one of these sweeps off, or like a Greco-Roman throw off, you can end up basically, or judo throw, you can end up basically in a very dominant position, like a full mount, like almost immediately. And this is actually what's going to happen here. We're going to rewatch this just a little bit. Throws the body shot, grabs the wrist, Tsarukyan goes for the knee, gets swept, and his Tsarukyan's escape here is to try to get this underhook under the leg and essentially come out the back door, right? He's trying to follow the momentum and just go out the back door if he can here. It doesn't work. And here's the problem with doing something like this. When you hit the mat and this arm is up like this, and you think like, hey, I'm gonna basically shrimp my butt this direction. The problem is if his leg comes back, which it does, it is going to trap your arm. And so then you end up into a position where you are full mounted with one of your arms trapped by his legs. And that basically means one of my arms is completely free from a full mount position, which is not good. So you can see this is a really bad position. Now, Makhachev in the process also kind of trapped his own arm for a second here because he had this underhook. This is how he ended up getting the takedown, the sweep from here. But he's going to lock into kind of a grapevine position on the legs here, and he's going to start trying to bring his arm free. And Tsarukyan does a really good job of immediately getting on his side. Like, you pretty much have to in that scenario. Like, you don't have an option. You basically have to start getting on your side and trying to shrimp out and getting your legs together and kind of scoot your butt to the side. But he's going to take a shot or two here. A little hard to see, but again, you can see the Dagestani guys, especially the guys that work with Khabib, they do this kind of leg triangle better than anybody else. And I actually teach my guys this one. I try to teach my guys as best I can this one. I just think this is so effective. A lot of guys, they lose mount, and it's like they lose mount and it's all the way to like, I lost mount, the guy standing up. I lost mount, we're all the way back to crazy scramble. I lost mount, I'm all the way back to guard or half guard. The cool thing about doing it where you just go straight to grapevine and you triangle your legs is you basically force a very slow they can get out and they'll escape, but over time. But you force a very slow escape for them to be able to get out from a mounted position. And you can kind of see it here. Like he's got this wrapped, and it's like this takes a while for Tsarukyan to kind of get his legs free because there's just no. It's very hard to just explode out of this, right? Because your legs are just kind of just completely locked up, right? And he slowly works his way out, and it takes a minute. But like there wasn't a scenario where you're gonna just get bumped off, right? That could be the problem with mount. Like you get full mount and guys can just explode right away, and you end up in this, like, they make a gap between your hips and their hips, and they're shrimping out, they're getting their legs in, they're going for leg locks. In a scenario like this, it's basically impossible to do that. That's one of the reasons I like the triangle, like the leg triangles on the legs so much. Again, I'm going to highlight Makhachev just does good body work. Again, right hook to the body, left knee to the body. One of the things I try to teach people is when you're throwing knees in an MMA scenario and you're in like a 50-50 position, is if you have the left under, let's say I have my left underhook, right, and I'm driving somebody up off that side, that is the better side to typically knee off of, just because it's very difficult for them to do anything with it except for like the Makhachev sweep you just saw, but you kind of have to have that set up. If you knee off the same side you have the underhook, their arm is out of position, so they can't easily just grab down and start attacking the leg for a takedown, right? So most of the time you want to hit the lead knee to the body off the underhook side. And you'll see him hit the body again, and then he goes straight back into this little lead knee, body, lead knee. It's super sharp shot too. He aims it really nice and low. That's something else that a lot of guys just don't practice knees enough. Like they don't work knees into their training on heavy bags, whatever, name the thing. So when they go for knees like that, you'll see in fights, it's really common guys hit guys low. Right? They'll hit them low, or they hit them way too high, right? They go way up into the chest, and it's because you just haven't had the experience of throwing thousands of knees at a small target or on a bag and just touching like one spot over and over again. Guys try to power knees, but in reality, like the better knees are these little fast, like sharp, like shots that land really well. And you'll see that, like I said, Makhachev there, he lands right above the belt, right? And it's just under the elbow. It's very hard to block that. Most people's arms aren't long enough to bring their arm and just have it sit by like directly where their waistline is. So what you're getting is you're getting a gap, right? So if you think of the waistline being here, most people's elbows are like right here when they bring it down. So you're hitting like right underneath that, and that's what Makhachev is really good at doing. He gets those knees off a lot, and then he just keeps hammering the body with that right punch. This is something I think Tsarukyan does pretty good here, is that he seems to bait his head very low to the outside. This can be dangerous. Actually trained a guy in a pro fight. He had his head deep. So a lot of wrestlers, they like to put their head super deep to this underhook side. If you can just make a guy hold your whole weight on that underhook side, it can be really hard to deal with. Plus, you can collapse the underhook in for takedowns, right? So you basically bring the this arm right here, right? You could push that arm down with your head, and then you end up into a position where it's easy to get to singles and doubles. Problem with it is they can knee you in the head. So if you kind of watch, he's kind of baiting his head very low here, and you can see Makhachev start to posture, right? He gets narrow. So when guys get a little like upright and like narrow, it's usually a good indicator they're trying to throw a kick or a knee, because it's very hard from a very wide stance to bring one leg up. For obvious reasons, you kind of fall off balance, right? So you need like one foot kind of underneath you. Brings the leg up, and Tsarukyan kind of pulls away with it and then shoots his underhook under the leg here and actually starts a pretty good scramble, right? So he's going to drive him down. Now, Makhachev's balance is fucking unreal, man. Like, I get it, like, but I mean, one of his feet is on the cage, right? His other leg is here. His butt and back are basically against the cage, and he's doing like a breakdancing one arm stance right here. And then he just does a good job of just staying calm through kind of this whole thing. He goes hands down, feet down, back position, right? Keeps his butt against the cage, which is smart. That's the first thing you want to do if you end up in a position where somebody's on your back in an MMA fight, and you're kind of in this like, bear crawl position, I guess, if you will. You want to run your ass to the cage. And what he'll do is he's kind of pushing his butt to the cage. And you can see Tsarukyan's really, really wants to get behind him, like really bad. You can see both his legs are kind of coming behind him. He is trying to separate Makhachev from the cage here as much as possible. So he's going to try to pull him away because he realizes he's probably not going to get behind him. So he comes into the front here and starts blocking the knee and then tries to drag him onto his hands, which is what you want to do. Drags him down. Nice. Really good. But Makhachev, again, just being as good as he is, just doesn't accept it. Hits his knees to the floor, comes right back up, keeps his butt against the cage here the whole time, and doesn't allow Tsarukyan to get behind him. And he starts turning into him, which is a good move here. Again, he's going to have his body against the cage here, keeping himself really pressed against it as much as possible. He's going to bring the arm across here, try to cross face him over. He is trying to get Tsarukyan's head over and across to this other side, ideally, right? Or if he can, turn his hips into him, but it's going to be pretty hard to do. Tsarukyan's got his body locked up pretty hard here. So he's trying to get his head across. There it is. And that is going to help stop a lot of the issues here. Now you've created a small gap over on this side where the hand is, and that is going to allow him to start wrestling. And he can overhook here, and Tsarukyan, just being real strong, just kind of lifts him here, blocks the back leg against the cage, and then just pulls him across. So you can kind of see it getting set up right here. You'll see Tsarukyan takes, can't see his whole body, unfortunately. I hate little pet peeve. MMA, stop recording it like it's a boxing match. It's not. You need to record the legs. Anyways, so the back knee right here, his right knee, is going to come to the center of Makhachev's body, the center of Makhachev's legs. And he's going to use this hip and leg to block Makhachev against the cage and then drag him off and down. So right here, you see the leg comes to the middle. You could just barely see his knee in the middle there. And what's going to happen is he is going to body lock him tight to him, block his hip with his hip, and then try to drag him across. So one of his legs essentially stays, Makhachev's legs stay behind him. And you can see it right here. See how his leg is kind of just stuck back here. Like this leg for balance needs to be over here somewhere, but it's been blocked by his hip because as he's turning him, he's turn. You can just see Makhachev's leg kind of do a spinning wheel kick around him, and he's just not in a position to outrun it, essentially. And he ends up falling and gets taken down, sort of. Makhachev, again, just being really good, immediately goes for this heavy wizard position, and then he was trying to kind of almost wizard kick, it looks like, into here. So, and then reverses to make space. This space is useful, right? If you will go back one step here, gets taken down, gets rotated, down, boom. Okay, he's here. So this bottom leg is kind of stuck. He needs to get that out, which he does right away. So he ends up in kind of this dogfight position, right? And he realizes Tsarukyan is pretty good. Tsarukyan is going to try to crush that overhook. How do you do that? You spin towards the back because you're basically taking their arm and you're making their arm kind of almost Kimura themselves, right? You're trying to make them come behind themselves, like snap the arm off. And so he's rotating around, and Makhachev realizes that and goes, yeah, nah. And he pops his hips the other direction, shooting the overhook on the other side and planting the ground here, creating space. We need this space, right? For the guy on bottom, we always need to create space if we're trying to get back up. But Tsarukyan is, again, really good. Tsarukyan, really slick little knee tap right there, drops him down, right? Makhachev has to go to all fours again, so we're right back where we were. Gets a little shot in on the jaw there. Nothing crazy there, but it's to remind him, hey, I can punch you while we're doing this. It's not the worst idea if you're not going to lose position to constantly pepper guys. At this point, Makhachev is trying to fight the hands as much as possible here. He gets taken down, but just does a really good job of just not allowing his back to be taken, keeping his leg nice and high here. He turns back into him, isn't going to get to that position that he wanted, goes right back to his knees, fights the hands, but eventually, once he sees the cage, that's really the move. Like he's close enough to where he could basically crawl to the cage and work his way back up. This is a lot easier than trying to have somebody on your back and fight this open air. If you're in open space and somebody's on your back and they're just dragging you down and threatening back takes constantly, if you're within 6 feet to the cage at least, or honestly even maybe 10 feet, I would say, if you could just crawl to the cage and work your way up off the cage, it's a lot easier. And you can see Makhachev kind of gets himself to the cage here, puts his hip into it, and then he just starts fighting hands. And this right here, him being able to lean into the cage here, gives him the so much more of an advantage than he would have open space. When you're in open space, think about it like this: like if somebody's trying to take you down, they're going to be pushing you forward, back, side, angles, constantly, kind of trying to outbalance you. I mean, that's wrestling 101 essentially. You're trying to off balance somebody. That's the whole point of it. I'm trying to get you down to the ground by off balancing you. When you have the cage, right, depending on where you're at the very least you are taking 180 degrees of that away, right? They can no longer just push you farther forward, right? So you can lean into that with the knowledge like, hey, he has to pull me this way, or he can kind of move me side to side a little bit, but that's about it, right? You lose a big area here. And so Makhachev's going to fight the hands, breaks the grip, both hands on one, which is smart. If you can get both hands on one arm and you separate their arm completely from your body, the chances of them being able to take you down is very low at that point, right? So you got to remember that like most guys are not going to be able to like take you down with just one arm and two legs, because their legs got to do a lot of the lifting. So then they're lifting you essentially with one arm, or they're trying to move you off balance with one arm, right? So it's difficult to do much once a guy's kind of broken your grip completely like this. Then Makhachev uses his left arm, comes underneath, gets the underhook position, and they're back to 50-50 here. All right, guys, going into round two, one of the things that you tend to see when a lefty and a righty are facing each other is you always hear about the foot battle. That's the big one, right? Beat the lead foot. You have to be on the outside of the lead foot. That puts you in the better position. But one of the things that people don't talk about enough is the hand battle. So you'll just notice that these guys are going to be touching their lead hands constantly. So here, right? They're touching each other's hands, touch. You just see this a lot. I just wanted to highlight that a little bit just because chances are you're going to see the same thing in this fight. You usually see this quite often in fights with southpaws facing orthodox fighters. What we're going to see here is Makhachev is going to lean in for a jab. Tsarukyan is going to drop in and end up in a single leg. A big problem that you see when guys shoot in on opposite stances is, again, camera work, guys, back up, is that when you go in for a shot on somebody of the opposite stance, it is very hard to get anything but in on a single leg. And single legs in MMA just are not as useful as double legs. It's a lot harder to keep them, and it's a lot harder. I've said it a couple times, but positionally speaking, if you get them down, it's not always the best position. You can get back taken and so forth. And you'll kind of see it here. He just gets flattened, right? Makhachev pops his hip in, turns his hip in towards the head, overhooks the arm right here, and just puts a lot of weight, puts his chest into the back of Tsarukyan's head, and it kind of puts him straight into this wrestler's headlock position. We just kind of end up fighting from here. And almost the exact same thing happens here. You're going to see Islam come in for a jab again. Tsarukyan ducks. This time he's really trying to go deep, so you can see he shoots his head all the way to this back hip. But again, when we're facing the opposite stance, the hips are so open. This is such a hard takedown to get through, and he has to drop all the way to his knee to try to get to that back, and he still just doesn't get there. It is hard to take down the opposite stance. If you're going to end up hitting something like that, you almost need to switch your stance in the process. So, you could throw your rear right hand or your overhand into shooting off to that side to fight off that side. I just think shooting in traditionally from the front leg, if they're in the opposite stance, becomes extremely difficult to actually get anything off. Here, I just want to highlight some more body work Islam's pretty good at. He just gets into these positions. He punches constantly. He'll grab for the wrist, so forth, control that. Gets off a really good knee here. Goes right back to punching again. He just works people's bodies really well in fights. Here you're going to see Makhachev hit the sweep that he hit in the first round. Again, Tsarukyan's a little lazy on the knee here. I think he's bringing up this knee because he feels like he's about to get kneed by Makhachev. Anytime that Makhachev gets, again, kind of postured upright like this, gets straight on, he's throwing pretty hard knees, right? He's been throwing really hard knees off both legs. And so I think he was like, oh, I'll bring this up and I'll kind of defend against this knee coming. But unfortunately, you put yourself in a pretty bad spot here. He has this overhook position. You're leaning this direction. He's leaning, Tsarukyan is, to his right side. And so Makhachev just steps up with his back leg here, his left leg, and just sweeps him off balance again. Now, Tsarukyan's had this done on him once, so his scramble is much better than it was before. And really just clean transition down to the single leg off of that, too. And then it comes into the single leg position. Tsarukyan does a good job, immediately puts the head to the outside, right? And then the thing that a lot of guys don't do in MMA, which is smart, is Islam knows in MMA, single legs have to be used a certain way. So he starts to spin him off balance and back, right? You kind of got to pull back and down. And then he covers the hip here too. So if they hit the mat, he's not going to end up in some position where his left arm here is on the inside of the leg and he can escape to a good spot, right? So he tries to pull him down, and he's successful. Goes to the back, comes up, gets body lock. Tsarukyan's wrestling is really good, man, just really good. Defends immediately, goes to the Kimura position for Tsarukyan, and starts fighting this Kimura from here. So, what's the problem here? The problem with the Kimura is it locks you into the person. Yes, you could sub somebody with it, but you can also just get locked into a position like this where you can get taken down. Now that's fine, but you got to have a really good Kimura. Kimura tends to be a little bit of a strength move. It could be difficult to do if somebody's the same size as you and they're strong and they're good at jiu-jitsu, your chances of getting a Kimura off, I think, are pretty slim. Maybe some people disagree on that one, but you can kind of see he ends up just kind of actually getting himself locked into a position where it's easy to take him down, and it's also easy to hold him down now in a guard position here. And he's not able to do much with this, at least currently. So for me, the Kimura from the cage is not usually the best move. The Diaz brothers, I think they both used to use this. I know Nate used to. For the most part, outside of a few guys, I've not seen like standing Kimuras always be the best move. And usually when it is a good move, it's usually done by like a fucking behemoth of a human being, like some dude who could just rip your shoulder out. Unless that's you, I probably wouldn't be hitting Kimuras off the cage. Okay, so from here, Tsarukyan has the Kimura position, and is going to start to realize that he has to kind of let this go. He's not gonna get it. He's burning his arms out. So what he's gonna do here in a second is you're gonna see him try to post right here. So this is super common. This is usually used if you're trying to either get back up, reestablish the Kimura deeper, or go for a guillotine. So he's going to get to this position, and then he's going to kind of decide what's going on. Islam does the classic, just reach out, body lock tight, see if you can reach the back arm. Ideally, you would reach up with this hand right here, and you would be grabbing this back arm. If you're long enough, you would grab that back arm, and you would drag him back down, and you would trap his arm underneath himself, right? He's going to miss this, but he still has that forward pressure. And Tsarukyan wraps back around for the guillotine, which is pretty common. You try to scoot yourself back if you can get that guillotine. If you're going to get flattened out, that's a good place to go to, just because you're trying to get up like this. You're getting flattened over. You're getting ran over. So you're going to have to come over the top with something. You have to threaten with something else. And what happens here is he doesn't really have it, right? So he's going for this guillotine, and then he kind of kicks his leg into the middle for the butterfly to help set up the guillotine. The problem with that is if you don't have the guillotine yet and you kind of go to this position, you're just creating a position where somebody could pass. So he gets this kind of butterfly. Islam starts to turn his hips to try to pass. So you can kind of see how Islam's hips are slightly tilted towards the ceiling, if you will, towards the roof up, whatever. And he's going to start passing right here. He's got this underhook. His head's completely out. Islam, you can look at Islam's back of his neck, and it just He's two rods of muscle. He's a hard guy to choke. So and then he just kind of gets into this double butterfly body lock position. And then he just body locks past here in a second. So he'll just body lock past this. It's really hard to see, but I'm pretty sure that he uses his elbow to push the butterfly hook down and passes with a body lock pass and comes around to the outside here. Tsarukyan immediately goes completely sideways, which you kind of in MMA almost have to do. Nowadays it's a lot easier to get out of side mount than it used to be. Side position, whatever, side control. When I was fighting way back in the day, side used to be considered like the spot to get guys to. Nowadays, most guys just they wrestle up so well or they scramble so well out from side that it's very hard to keep this on people. So Islam keeps his body weight over the top, keeps this arm here to make sure that if he comes back, he has the underhook position. And Tsarukyan immediately wrestles to his side. Now, you're not going to be able to see this, but I know this is what's going on, is that Tsarukyan is going for a single leg. So he's going to try to get that right top arm through and get his hands together, and he's going to try to wrestle up from this position. And he does successfully. I think he's in a full kind of half guard position here. He reestablished his inside leg on the inside. He has his arms through Islam's leg here. And he is going to fight up for the single here in a second. And yep, and he uses that. So you can see what he did here. He's going to start setting up this arms in here. Islam is going to have to try to drag his head across back so he doesn't end up with his back being taken or head outside single position. Again, we want to kind of work him back to the inside here ideally. And then we end up here, and Tsarukyan was losing that position on the way up, so he knew that, so he tried to club him down. He tried to keep the single club over the top. Didn't work, and then we ended up with kind of this on the cage here. Here we will continue to see Tsarukyan just go all out on trying to get these takedowns. He puts everything he has into trying to get these. He ends up in a single. Islam just punishes these guys when they wrestle with him. If you try to wrestle with Islam, you're getting kneed, you're getting elbowed, you're getting punched a lot. And it's usually pretty clean shots. Tsarukyan goes right back to trying to get in on that single, has to lift him up, drop. You end up kind of giving up here. You can kind of tell like he's just like, okay, I'm gonna try to drop underneath, see if I can build up underneath you that way. Tries to drag him off the cage. At this point, Islam pretty much has pretty good position, and he is going to beat on Tsarukyan here a little bit. And Tsarukyan gets completely stretched out. This is not the position you want to be in on a single. If your head's underneath somebody and you're stretched out like this, you've kind of probably, I wouldn't say kind of, you've 99% lost the single leg battle. It's going to bring his head up, and we're going to end up in a position where now Islam is in the better spot. Right, and that was a lot of energy. So it was a lot of energy to try to make that work, right? So you ended up in the Kimura initially, and again, this is just decisions, right? So it's like you put yourself, you try to go for a Kimura off the cage, which is kind of a low probability thing. It actually got you locked into a position where you got dragged down, and then you ended up in a guard position, which is super not ideal. Couldn't get the Kimura, so you kind of burnt your arms out a little bit trying to go for the Kimura. You had to scoot your hips back to try to get back up or go for a guillotine. The guillotine didn't work out. You got body lock passed, and then you got the side mount. You were able to scramble your way back up out of half guard from a single, and then you drove him to the cage, and then you were going for single, and you kind of gassed. Try to get underneath them, try to build your way back up, didn't work, and then you got reversed. He's doing a lot of work, but the problem becomes where it's just not the most effective work, right? And in the process of all that, frankly, like didn't do really any damage to Makhachev, and really the only good shots that were landed were by Makhachev. So starting the third round, Makhachev has landed a jab, and then Tsarukyan kind of threw an overhand, didn't really land it. And then we get a nice little counter here from Makhachev. This is probably one of my favorite counters. So what you're going to see here is Tsarukyan throws an overhand and ends up hitting the glove of Makhachev. And then Makhachev immediately when he gets hit, he actually responds back with his left. And you kind of see how Tsarukyan responds, right? Super small little shot that I don't think a lot of people would normally see, but honestly, like you can see how he responds to it. And these are the shots, in my opinion, that do the most damage. These really hard little stiff shots that are really fast counters. You can see it kind of landed. You can see his face here. He's like, fuck. So again, Makhachev just does a lot of things really, really well and correct and just very like solid. Right here, what you're going to see, Makhachev has a really good left roundhouse kick. Both these guys are throwing kicks throughout the fight, but this is the only one so far in the fight that actually seems like it did anything. Really nice, just little kick up at an angle. This is something else I see guys just do wrong. When you're throwing roundhouse kicks, guys, if you're fighting somebody, you're not trying to hit them like this, like big circle and coming around. You're trying to make it as linear as possible and then cut it right at the top, like bang, one of those. And Makhachev's really good about that. Like he just cuts that kick, especially being a lefty. You want to sneak it like you're almost punting at him, and then you want to cut it right at the very top. So here what you're going to see is, in my opinion, a little better way to enter if you are the opposite stance, if you're trying to come in to take somebody down. Tsarukyan's going to throw an overhand right, and he's going to actually enter across shooting in. Still not easy. Again, this is why shooting on the opposite stance is such a bitch. You have to close a huge gap. So even here, he gets all the way in, but just gets sprawled on and just gets flattened out. Again, Makhachev does everything correctly here. Overhook, turns his hips towards his head, putting the pressure down, kicks his right leg back and away, and immediately starts going for really solid elbows here. You want to punish guys when they shoot on you, because it takes a lot of energy to shoot, first of all, and it takes a lot of energy to defend. So if they shoot in on you and they drop in underneath you, you gotta punish them a bit, make them not want to do that. And Makhachev just does a good job defending here in general, just collapsing him down, grabs the back leg so he can't drive through and back underneath. You don't want guys like building themselves back up underneath you. And Makhachev just kind of floats here for a little bit, and they come back up to the single leg. And again, we're right back where we were, where he's just defending the single leg really well. If at all possible, whenever you're wrestling, especially in MMA, you really want to make, if you can, you would want to defend the double as much as possible and give up the single leg. Meaning, if I can make somebody, if somebody shoots on me and I have to fight a double leg, and I can kind of bait them to go for the single leg, you're going to have a little easier time most of the time fighting the single leg than you are fighting the double. And also, even if you end up in a position where you get taken down off the single leg, you just end up in better scramble positions than you do off of double legs. So most of the time when you do have somebody shoot on you, you're trying to sprawl in such a way that they are going to be inclined to just want to switch off to the single leg and then fight the single. And again, we just see Islam defending the single pretty much perfectly, fighting the hands, overhook position, and then when he finally breaks, you can feel the grip. You can feel the grip underneath him start to break, and he's putting all of Tsarukyan's weight, almost like his whole body weight is on the back of Tsarukyan's head, and Tsarukyan's head is being pressed down into his knees, right? And he's going to want to back up to try to get that pressure off of him. It's stand up. And so you'll see him back up, pressure up, and then immediately Makhachev gives no pressure release at all. He pushes into him and throws a knee, really good knee right there. A little low, maybe on the edge, but it was a body shot. It was on the belt. But just an excellent knee there. And again, you got to punish these guys when they shoot on you. If they're going to shoot underneath you and use all that energy, especially somebody like Tsarukyan, who kind of like goes balls out on his shots and really explodes and tries to scramble. When they're coming up for air, and you got to dunk them back under and get them tired. And the easiest way to do that is just go right back to their body the second that they're resting. Tsarukyan's going to shoot back in for a single. Going to come underneath the jab, shoots through, tries to get to the double leg again, shooting to the back hip's a bitch, and just gets sprawled out on. Islam, overhook position, turns his hips in towards the head, kicks the leg back and away, puts all the weight into him, almost all bounces him there. Then immediately on the head, that is perfect. You push the head down under your hips, and you see what we're doing. We talked about this a second ago, but he pushes the head down under his hips, and then he sprawls completely out on the top of his head. Look at the extension that he's created here. This is a position where his arms are so far above his head. Like both his arms are just super stretched out, right? Super uncomfortable. His head's down, so he's looking like this, and his arms are all stretched out over the top of his head. His back is low. I mean, this is the worst lifting posture you can imagine, right? Imagine you had to lift a ton of weight, and you have to do it from this position. It's going to be almost impossible. He's also making him in a position where he can't drive himself back underneath to try to kind of like raise him up. It'd be very difficult because he just has so much pressure on the back of his neck. Tsarukyan's going to try to scramble out of this position, kind of tries to go for like almost a fireman's, and then they just end up in kind of a wild scramble here for a second. But again, Makhachev just ends up with body weight on the back of Tsarukyan's neck and head, overhook position. Tsarukyan is feeling probably smothered at this point, like he's just getting crushed. So he's going to try to come up. Again, this is when they come up for air. Look at him disengage. Makhachev, if I had to guess, just judging here, his right arm is probably framed against his neck. And what he's going to do is he's going to posture and immediately go for a good knee there. And again, man, you got to hit these guys when they come up. You want to keep the pressure on them. If you're wrestling with somebody or they're wrestling with you, right, and you sprawl out on them, and they get to separate after they fail. That's what they want, right? If you're shooting in, like I'm trying to take somebody down, I shoot in and I get control of somebody, and I'm failing this, and I start to feel that break. I'm trying to break to disengage entirely so we can get back to something like this, so I can rest. So if I'm on defense, somebody shoots on me and I sprawl them out, I crush them down, and they start to stand up, I'm immediately on them, right? I'm clenching them the second I'm clenching them somehow. I'm tie clenching them, I'm underhooking them, I'm framing on their face, I'm trying to elbow, I'm trying to hit the knees, because at that point, this is when you can really do your best work on somebody like this, because they are essentially trying to rest. They're just trying to rest. And then immediately, Islam is in and putting pressure on Tsarukyan, and Tsarukyan's kind of looking around like, and you can see how much Tsarukyan is starting to struggle here. And it's a lot of gas, man. He's been wrestling real hard. And then Islam gets super solid takedown under the butt, just classic. Guys try to be too fancy. All he did, got his shoulders basically where his hips were, got his hands together under the butt. Tsarukyan wasn't turning his hips. He wasn't doing what he needed to do on the cage, and he just got lifted. He just got lifted up in the air at that point and turned to take him down. And so now we're here. And again, such a good job. The immediate takedown from there into that position, into the leg triangle position there, is so useful. So again, Tsarukyan has his this is just not the move in most cases here. He has his weight over the top of him. So if your arm is over the top of someone's neck when they are trying to do a takedown, especially on the cage, you have what I call backpacked yourself. You're essentially putting all your weight across the back of their neck. So if they're trying to lift, right, and it's not exactly, but he's putting a lot of his upper body weight right around here, which is where you're pretty strong, right? If you think of doing a squat, you put a lot of that weight like right across your traps in that area. So like lifting like this, you can lift a lot of weight up here. So it would probably have been better if Tsarukyan was bringing this arm down and turning his hips and trying to fight for an underhook or trying to fight the elbow. The problem can be this guy, Islam is in so deep at this point. His arms are both locked in, and also he's a fucking monster, super strong. And at this point, it's kind of like you're probably a little bit locked into this position just because it's going to take a second to squirm your hips back and forth and really digging to get through. I wouldn't have used my arm over his head here. I just don't think that's the better move. Cross face him, shoot, fight the elbow, shoot the underhook if you can, something. But he gets lifted, taken down, slam down here, and then immediately we're in this position. Islam's legs are both nice and wide. Islam starts bringing his arms down even lower, scoops both legs here, lifts them up, covers with the leg triangle, and then forces Tsarukyan. And this, getting out of this as the bottom person is fucking exhausting. It is fucking exhausting. It takes a lot of work. Your legs are not involved almost at all, right? Because again, both your legs have basically been locked together. It's like if somebody took a belt and just wrapped it as tight as they could around your knees, right? And then just locked it, and now you have to like try to free that from yourself. It's a lot of upper body, and it's a lot of like core, and your legs just are not terribly involved as you do this, as much as some other escapes, that is. pushing, pushing. You can just see like this is a hard position to get out of because Islam doesn't have to do any work. He's just resting here. And really good shot, right? Islam is going to be looking for this back arm here to flatten him out. This is not helping Tsarukyan. Grabbing this wrist is not helping. It's instinct, right? You got hit in the face. You're like, I don't want to get hit in the face. Grab the arm, right? But it's not actually that useful because what it's doing now is it's putting him into, now that is a better choice. He should be using the top arm here to fight the wrist and not the bottom arm. The bottom arm, you do not want Islam being the top guy to get to this wrist and flatten you out. And Islam is really trying for it, and he ends up getting the wrist position. But in the process, he's kind of losing the leg lock, right? And again, this is just another position where you can get held down really, really well because how are you going to make a base if you can't, if Islam is putting all your weight on your hands, which is what he's doing right now, and then he has one of your wrist locked into your body and he's putting all that weight to that side, you're not getting back up. So this is why you would extend the arm out in this position more if you can. Again, easier said than done, but when you're here, this arm needs to be up and away, right? Not letting yourself get into, because he got hit in the face. That was a hard shot. So immediately he gets hit in the face. He's like, yeah, abandoned ship. I'm just going to grab whatever I can. But again, this locks this bottom arm underneath you. So this position, this is a position of exhaustion. He's really upright. Islam is pushing hard into his diaphragm here and with his shoulder, and you can just see his face. It's exhaustion. He's looking up at the timer right now, if you're kind of wondering where he's looking at. Again, that's an indication of being tired. He's not turning in towards Islam like he probably should be. And he is just going to kind of rabbit punch a little bit here to try to hopefully accrue some damage. Ends up getting taken down from here. Tries to butterfly kick him up to at least sweep him off to start like building up underneath. He's able to get both his legs in and get to a leg lock ish position to start of a leg lock position, but doesn't really go anywhere. A lot of this is fatigue, and a lot of that is from a lot of failed shots, getting beat up when you did fail the shots. And honestly, the stand-up wise, there wasn't a whole lot of stand-up in this fight, but the stand-up that did happen, Makhachev was landing cleaner shots and seemingly more of them. Honestly, very little stuff landed for either guy. So most of it was just these grappling exchanges. Tsarukyan at this point is kind of almost forced into trying to work his way up by putting his right arm on the ground here in a second. So he'll put his right arm on the ground and reach up and over the top, almost again like putting himself into the Kimura position or the guillotine position. He's going to crawl himself to the cage here. In the process of doing so, you'll see Islam just keeps this body lock tight and keeps the pressure forward. Tripods himself up so he's on his feet, but driving his weight forward. So again, we always try to make the bottom person hold our weight some way, right? The bottom guy right now has to hold all of his weight to frame himself up on this one arm and shoulder. Just tiring. I'm going to drive him back. Islam, like I said earlier, these guys are just really good at this. What they do is they all are good. These Dagestanis are all really good at these this leg triangle position. So they they kick the leg over the top, hook it, and replace their arms with the legs, and we end up in this position here. And this against the cage sucks. This is a crappy position to be in when you're the guy on bottom against the cage. And that's the end of the fight. I am not sure that Tsarukyan won a single round in that fight, to be honest with you. Watching in slow-mo, to me, he didn't really do much. He didn't get a single takedown. He basically landed no significant offense at all. And Islam just ended up in the better positions, clearly ended up landing the harder, cleaner shots, in my opinion. It looked pretty one-sided to me. I mean, I don't think it was like a blowout by any stretch, but to me, if you had it 30-27 Islam for that fight, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, so watching this, and I know this is from 3 years ago now. So it's been a while, and Tsarukyan's improved. But if you just look at this fight and the fact that they've already faced each other once, it is hard to see where Tsarukyan improves significantly to win. Islam kind of shut down his wrestling, and when they did get into heavier wrestling exchanges, it seems like Islam was just better offensively and defensively. When he hit the ground and it turned into more of a jiu-jitsu scenario, again, it just seemed like I mean, Islam was never really on his back, but when he was on top, Islam was just doing. You could just tell he was progressively getting farther and farther along to more and more dominant positions. I mean, Islam got far more takedowns that he actually was able to control. I think Tsarukyan got one takedown really, and that was off of almost getting kneed in the face, if I recall. So yeah, watching this, Tsarukyan's stand up, I think, needs to be a lot better. I don't think there's a lot of places wrestling wise he could super improve. He's facing a guy who's the opposite stance of him, which means that if you're trying to wrestle with him, it's always going to be more difficult. If he just doesn't want to wrestle with you, there's a reason Adesanya for years used to just open stance to whoever he was facing if they're a wrestler. If your striking is worlds better than the guy you're facing, but you're not as good of a wrestler, you could switch stance and still beat the shit out of a okay MMA striker because you just have, again, you're Adesanya. You have a world level of striking. You can go the opposite stance and still fuck somebody up, and it's way easier to prevent the takedown. And you can kind of see that in this fight. Same thing. Islam is not the same stance as Tsarukyan. He's the opposite stance, and when you're trying to shoot on that opposite stance, it's a motherfucker. And most of the time, what you end up having to do is you end up having to get these takedowns against the cage because stance doesn't matter anymore, right? The cage, there is no stance on the cage, right? Because they're flat against it essentially. So you could choose the side that you're going to enter in and get the takedown from there. So that's kind of my breakdown. Just some stuff that you kind of might want to try yourself, things that you might see that you can improve your own game. Hell, even if you just want to watch this for information so you can make decisions on who you think is going to win this fight. I mean, having to watch this, I mean, I have a hard time seeing Islam losing this fight, especially over 5 rounds. Tsarukyan looked gassed out. Islam didn't look super fresh, but he didn't look nearly as gassed out. And Islam was putting in hard work to the body over and over again. And I just think like if this fight kept going longer, it looked bad. It looked like Tsarukyan was definitely on the downswing, especially at the end. So, anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Again, I always make these way too long. So if you stayed the whole time, I do appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, follow me, all that fun stuff. I do appreciate it, and hopefully somebody got something out of this somewhere. So, everybody have a good day.